Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series perfect for fans of Agotar and Fourth Wing. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the gods fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hulk, a god bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
Apologies, I know you've been waiting.
There's reports coming in from the countryside. They're saying we've landed mining rigs.
You seem animated.
Rumors spread quickly these days.
Well, I'm sure Captain Kaido has his assets in position.
That's why I thought it urgent we speak.
He's given orders to barricade the building.
I saw that. Seems a wise idea.
The mining equipment, already on site. Is that a story Director Krennic wants to be telling?
We're done with local rumors. The only story that matters is Ghorman aggression.
The threats. The inexplicable resistance to Imperial norm.
We need what's in the ground. The Empire has been patient long enough.
Hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode number 3 of Road to Rebellion, the official Around the Galaxy Andor after show. I am Pete Fletzer.
And while I am sitting here waiting on my finely woven twill Ghorman jacket, I am Nick Mielke. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on Around the Galaxy, part of the SSW Network.
Nick, I got some bad news. I don't think that jacket's coming anytime.
It's springtime. It's the perfect time for a nice, finely woven sport jacket. And
yeah.
I think you're right. That shipment's never going to show up.
That shipment's not coming because today we're going to talk about episodes 7, 8, and 9 of Andor. There's only 1 week left in the season, and wow, did a lot of things happen in these 3 episodes.
A whole bunch of things. And speaking of all those things, which we are going to do right now, I'm going to give you a quick warning. That's one of my roles here on this finely crafted podcast. This is a full spoiler show. We're going to talk about everything that happened this week. And as Pete said, there was a bunch. So we'll probably speculate. We'll probably dig into the lore. If you haven't fully watched episodes 7, 8, and 9, hit pause, go do that. Come back. It won't hurt our feelings. In fact, I think it will enrich your listening experience to see it play out in real time and not spoiled by the two of us.
And each week on Road to Rebellion, we are unpacking the story, the characters, the big moments, the little details, and really kind of everything in between.
That's it. We're going to do first impressions. We're going to dive into the themes of what's happened. And as we have done over the last couple episodes, we're going to pick each of our MVP for this little arc and talk about why we chose them.
So let's not wait any longer. It is time to kick this one off. Let's jump in with our first impressions. And Nick, I'm actually going to start with a hot take. I know when you and I watched this, we were texting back and forth, and I said, I have a couple of hot takes on these episodes. And that hot take is, not only is this the most brutal we have ever seen Star Wars, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it might have been overboard. And wow. I am not one to shy away from the most violent movies and video games. But my goodness, that Ghorman Massacre was, it was a lot. It was a lot. And I'm not even saying just for myself, because I actually enjoyed the episodes a lot. They were what they were what I wanted them to be, I guess. But man, the death in the streets, the violent deaths, the dragging of bodies across the square, it was almost too much. Am I out of line here, do you think?
I don't think you're out of line. And I think that it's, we kind of speculated on this a little bit before when we heard talk of the Tarkin massacre and what that meant, because we knew that based on what we had read and been in books and comic books, that Tarkin lands a shuttle on top of a bunch of protesters. And of course, we were certain we weren't going to see that on screen. They did such a good job of handling that with the hotel guy, kind of recapping being present and his father and that experience. So you get the horror of it without having to get the visuals of it. So that did lead to, how is this going to play out for the actual Ghorman Massacre? And I think you hit it right on the head. And honestly, I think as shocking as anything was the kind of the full scale implementation that we saw of the KX series droids, which we knew K2, we knew he was a big deal. He was powerful, that kind of stuff. But those droids, and we'll get into it in a little bit, throwing, people with Hulk-like strength and just, it was a lot. It was a whole lot. And I agree with you. I think impressions wise, this episode was very heavy. It drove home the point. It drove home exactly what's going on. And I also think for me, my other first impression was just how balanced these 3 episodes were. We didn't go, it's not tons and tons of jumping around. In fact, I think it's in episode 8. They stay on Ghorman that entire time. Not right. A bottle episode, but we've had episodes of things like Game of Thrones in the past where there's a show that typically jumps around every now and then. They have an episode that stays in one place. And that episode on Ghorman, they were there the entire time, which also I think lends to the weight of what that event was and what it means for Mon Mothma going forward, for her position in the rebellion. It was very balanced to me as far as covering those couple of areas, Ghorman, the Senate, and then, the role where that puts Cassian, of course.
For sure. Well, Nick, let's get into the story itself. I'll let you kick it off this week.
Absolutely. This week, our episode is directed by Janice Metz, written by Dan Gilroy, and then this is set in 2 BBY or BBY 2. We've gotten these, every grouping of episodes delivering on the promise that each of these 3 episode arcs are going to walk us right up to the Battle of Yavin. And this was no exception. Speaking of the Battle of Yavin, we open on the Rebel base at Yavin, which I know we have been excited to see. Just continues to feed those very nostalgic original trilogy Star Wars feels. A transport ship arrives. It's bringing in new recruits. The base is buzzing. Wilman Pack is back. He's coming back from his other missions, the places he's been. Cassian and Bix are living together in a treehouse on Yavin. Let me tell you right now, I want to live in that treehouse. I want to close off the rest of the world and spend the rest of my days in that very idyllic, yurt pod treehouse situation.
It felt very Ewok Village to me.
It definitely had an Ewok Village vibe without being eaten by teddy bears. So Cassian's nursing a shoulder injury. Will comes in. He and Bix, are clearly, as we've said before, they're together. Wilman shows up, kind of interrupts an intimate moment between them. Cassian wants to know where he's been, but he's holding that very close to the vest. He's staying vague. And then he delivers the message that we realize he was sent there to deliver. Luthen wants you. It's time to go. The bat signal has gone off when they're on Coruscant. It's that flashing light on the top of the building. Wilman is that flashing light this episode. He says he's trying to reach him and he wants to know, can he count on him? And so Cassian says going it alone doesn't cut it anymore. He learns that Wilman has been working on Ghorman for Luthen, and now Luthen wants Cassian to take out Dedra. They've progressed far enough in the timeline. Her presence is very full. She's there all the time. She's, very clearly leading all of this. Dedra destroyed Ferrix, has been targeting Luthen, killed Wilman's father. And he says it's not about revenge. She just has to be stopped. And so they're driving this narrative of, who is the face of this whole thing on Ghorman. And Cassian's resistant. He's reaching that point where he's over it. So he leaves and he goes to attend a rebel briefing there on Yavin instead.
It's interesting because Cassian has now become a captain. I think they say it either in this episode or maybe the 9th episode. I can't recall. But we know he's a captain. He's part of this rebellion. We see that the rebellion is no longer these little individual sort of strike missions. They are planning big things and they're planning, they're sort of setting the stage for Mon Mothma to come in and lead them. And so, but it strikes a very interesting chord in that, the rebellion is becoming real. And the question is, what role are you going to play? And I think, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but everybody's starting to feel like there's a different role for them in this. And this concept of, going it alone doesn't cut it anymore, but you still have Luthen and you still have a Saw Gerrera who kind of look at rebellion a little bit differently.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series, perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hawk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
But on Ghorman, news reporters are covering these terrorist attacks, as they're calling them, across the planet. Syril Karn is seen walking very nervously to work. We see Dedra in the safe room speaking to Partagaz, and Partagaz is telling her they're moving forward with the original plan.
The Emperor has taken a great interest in the situation.
Director Krennic's still with him now, but they wanted me to pass along the affirmative message to you immediately.
We are moving forward with the original plan.
There is apparently no suitable replacement or synthetic alternative for the Ghorman substrate material. I don't know the science, but it's bad luck Ghorman.
Cold as ice, it's bad luck Ghorman. Which is just, this, we knew this was coming. And honestly, I think the fact the looking for Calicite was just sort of a time filler for them because they knew this was going to happen. And he tells her to stay on schedule. They will need to declare martial law immediately. They send somebody named Captain Kaido, who is basically, he's the what did he say? He's the trigger and Dedra is the finger.
Yes.
He is there. Dedra argues that they already have enough security, but Partagas reminds her that if all goes to plan, she'll be rewarded, sort of saying, just be quiet, follow orders, keep things going. And then Dedra warns him that the insurgents now have weapons, and he says, we're counting on it. Again, this is this sort of really almost grotesque approach to it. Like, look, we know we're going to put weapons in their hands. We want them to attack
We did
us.
this. Yeah.
Yep. So Syril finally meets with Dedra. She keeps him in the dark about what's been happening, telling him to just go home, pack, and be ready to leave when she orders it. And she reassures him that good things are happening. Good things are waiting for us. And he says, for what? What have we accomplished? So Syril really has no idea what his role has been. So she just kisses him and says, do what I told you.
It's incredible because as we're seeing this whole thing go forward, like you said, it was really just kind of a time, biding their time. They're going after this mineral. This was the end game no matter what. I think that what is very telling is the way the Empire's doing it. Because they could have come in, they could have moved everyone out, taken what they wanted, but instead they intentionally, they seeded this, insurrection. That way they can say they were justified. Like they're still playing the political game. Palpatine at this point is still driving it with, false flag campaigns and getting them into a place where, trying to build, to not have an all out, well, look what they did on Ghorman. It was earned. It was deserved. And, they want them to have weapons. And we're going to see when this whole thing goes down, they start it. They light the match, but they light the match by shooting one of their own guys. It's a part of just a very drawn out, plan that ultimately this is what we're counting on. And you're right. The line, I'm the trigger, but you're the finger is brutal. Ultimately you're going to make the call, but I'm setting everything up. And that's just, again, to make sure it gets done the way the Emperor wants, the way those higher than Dedra want it to be. So we jump back to Coruscant. Mon Mothma and Erskine arrive. They're in the lobby. They're in the Senate area. Another night, another wave of terrorist attacks. And I love how they've used kind of this vehicle of the news reporters. It almost reminds me of that season of The Wire that was all about the newspaper. And they're showing this, they've kind of trickled galactic news. Even in the first season, Cyril's mom's watching, This Week in Coruscant or whatever it is that she's watching in her kitchen. They've brought that forward, and that creates a way not only for Cassian to go and pretend to be a reporter to show back up on Coruscant later, but we have Mon Mothma meeting with Senator Oren of Gorn. He thanks her for her continued courage, urges her to be careful, watch out for herself. On Ghorman, that underground front meets in their bunker, and Corran, who is Corran Rylance, he's kind of like the city councilor guy that is working and is a part of this. He's calling for peaceful protests. He says it's the only way to show dignity. But everybody else is restless. They're ready to jump. They've had enough. And then we have our friend, fake Super Mario Lazine. He chimes in and he remarks that the Emperor has succeeded in turning them against each other. This is exactly what they wanted. And they're hiding in basements. They're fighting amongst themselves, sowing chaos, because that's going to allow them to achieve their goals that much more easily. And so then they say, we're the Ghor. If they take us, what's worth saving? Like, what's left at this point? If we're tearing ourselves apart, what are we doing? They've already won.
Yep. And it kind of keeps them moving, giving them a reason to protest. And it's always interesting because, you always think something like these these, like the Ghorman Front or whatever sort of organization, is all on the same page, but they often are not. They often have the same objective, but a different way to get there.
Well, and we've seen that with the rebellion. You mentioned it before, with Saw versus, Luthen and Mon Mothma's rebels. And we're going to see that play out even more, even as we go into Star Wars Rebels and, into Rogue One. That's just the nature of any of these things, but they do such a good job of demonstrating. You've got the Empire, which has its own little, machinations and things inside of it, whether it's Dedra, who may or may not have a moment of hesitation, Syril, who's a part of it, but then he, kind of turns a corner. Then you have the rebellion side of it, which is the same thing, different factions. And then you have this third middle ground, which is insurrectionists who are being played that don't know they're being played. But even within their group, it's also not a unified front. And it's very fascinating because it's very human. It's very much, we can relate to seeing these kinds of things in, unfortunately, even modern day, our society right now.
Well, back on Yavin, a Force healer. This is the first time we've seen the use of the Force in this show. Is tending to some of the injured rebels, and Bix has tricked Cassian into going to visit the healer. And Cassian is skeptical of what he calls as a scam of Force healers. He doesn't believe in it. And then from across the courtyard where the healer's with other rebels, she senses Cassian, senses something about him, and believes who she's attending to and approaches Cassian. And then she senses that he's got this unhealed right shoulder from a blaster burn, and she lays her hands on the wound, closes her eyes, and then thanks him for clarity. And she calls it that feeling. It's been a very long time, so easy to lose faith, all that you've been gathering, the strength of spirit. And so Bix says to the healer, what did you see? And Cassian, he's had enough. This is all, smoke and mirrors to him. It doesn't mean much, so he just leaves. He's just having trouble with this whole concept of what the Force healer is. And then the healer, after he leaves, says to Bix, who is he? I sense the weight of things I can't see, pain, fear, need. Most beings carry the things that shape them, but some gather it as they go. She says he's a messenger. There's some place he needs to be. And then he says to Bix, maybe you're the place he needs to be. Now, we will talk about this when we get to the end of episode 9. But this is a very unique thing because, and I picked up on it, but I didn't put too much weight in it because Bix doesn't look too happy about that. She doesn't look unhappy, but it's not like the reassuring words she wanted to hear. But later on in his hut, Cassian's shoulder is fully healed. The healer worked, and Bix tells him what the healer said about he's a messenger. And Cassian says he's not happy to hear that, but Bix really believes that it's important. And I think this is the first time we've gotten sort of a chosen one kind of story to go along with Cassian. I wouldn't go so far as to call the Anakin chosen one at all, but certainly he's got a mission, and through the Force, this woman could sense it. Yeah.
And hats off to Dan Gilroy, because maybe you're the place he needs to be. That's a killer line. Very well written, very well delivered, and just hits you with, the weight of what this whole thing is. And we're seeing this in Cassian, certainly early on in this arc of these 3 episodes. He's conflicted. He's dealing with a situation of trying to figure out what is he doing? Where is he supposed to go? What's the next step of this? Because he's been in it for multiple years at this point. We're still on Yavin. The next day, General Draven makes his first appearance on Yavin base. We see him a lot in the Rogue One movie. Cassian is packing up to leave on his U-Wing, and Draven tells him, you're not authorized. You're not allowed to go. You're not a privateer. It's not about coming and going. And, Cassian kind of basically tells him, he's like, you already know about me. You know how I am. Box me in, and that's the first time I'm going to hit the road. So he ignores the order, heads out anyway. We end up back on Ghorman. Captain Kaido is overseeing the arrival of new Imperial recruits in the town square. And I love that they are green, they're nervous, they're ill-equipped. Just from looking at them, they're like, what is the deal with these guys? Like, they're not ready for what's coming. And I think we all understand that was, again, an intentional decision by the Empire. Cassian and Wilman arrive on Ghorman, and he checks into the hotel this time. He's doing that thing. He's undercover. He's a reporter from the Mid-Rim News. And the person checking him in at the counter is our friend, the Bellhop, from those earlier episodes, who helped him last time, and he recognizes Cassian, and he tells him, he's like, you're gonna have to carry your own bag this time, you know the way, which even to me, and I don't know if you got this, Pete, I felt like this spoke to the fact that like Cassian's been here a bunch of times. I didn't take it as like, ooh, I remember you from that one other time. Right. I took that as like, this has kind of become routine. You know the way, you know, you're in luck. I've got that same room. It's kind of its own deal. But there's certainly a recognition there. So back on Yavin base, we see Vel visiting with Bix, talks about Cassian, and Vel seems to have broken with Luthen, is a committed soldier to this part of the rebellion. And she says, Cassian's about to be promoted. And then he pulls this kind of stunt. You know, we're building a real army here. Cassian's the leader now. We've all given so much, and discipline doesn't seem too much to ask. So there's, again, just this, what is the expectations that they have for Cassian within the rebellion? He's right there. It's like a person with potential. You're right there. And then you mess up. But Cassian is a person who's driven by his own, you know, principles and goals and morals. Will has his girlfriend Drina in the Ghorman front, and he heads off to check back in because, as we said, he's been working with them over these last months. And Cassian in his hotel room, he unpacks his bag, does that great thing in so many movies. Oh, open your suitcase. There's the clothes. False bottom. Here's your sniper rifle. Time to start going to work. So very spy movie. And, you know, that's a lot of what this is this is the espionage and this underground nature of what the rebellion is. So set up very well, visually stunning as always.
Yeah. And, you know, and again, this is one of those episodes that not a lot happens, but a lot of pieces put on the table for episode 8, which is, you know, episode 7 ends with Cassian kind of, you know, looking through his sniper rifle and trying to figure out if he can get the shot at Dedra. But the next day, in the beginning of episode 8, Cassian wakes up and he sees that the Empire is building barricades in the square. They're building a fortress. And Dedra calls Partagaz because there are rumors coming in from the countryside saying that the Empire has landed mining rigs already. Dedra asks if the mining equipment on site is a story that Krennic wants to tell. And Partagaz, another great line, says, we are done with local rumors. The only story that matters is the Ghorman aggression, the inexplicable resistance to Imperial norms. They need what's in the ground, and they are through waiting. So it's, you know, it's sort of like, okay, that's it. We're done. We're going to set this little battle thing up, and we're going to do what we need to do, but we already got the mining equipment coming down. Comms are down across the city. So Syril is told his door is knocked on by an Imperial troop who says you need to go to the IOC building. Ghorman protests are coming. Protesters are coming into the plaza. They're shouting, we are the Ghor, the galaxy is watching, like in unison. And it's haunting. They're just shouting it with their, you know, arms in the air. Caro, Cara Rylands, who is, as we said before, sort of the leader of everything, he pleads with people who are walking into the square, just telling them it's an Imperial trap. He's figured it out. He's figured it out that they're being set up for this. It's almost like he's seen this sort of thing in the past, and perhaps he has. He runs into Syril on the street and he asks him,
you dare walk our streets! You dare walk among us! All this time, you... How could we be so foolish? Mention no harm. How do you say that? How do you speak the words? You've destroyed us.
I was here to trap outside agitators.
Look at you. Even now. People know what you're doing. We've had reports all night. There's mining equipment being dropped all over the planet. Rigs and droids.
It's a rumor.
Are you mad? That I'd believe that? That it's worth saying? What kind of a being are you? What's in our ground? What is it you've been sent to steal from us?
and Syril, who's just in no mood to fool around, just throws him to the ground as the Ghorman front and the Ghorman citizens. It's no longer just the Ghorman front; it's all the citizens walk through toward the square.
Yep. Well, and you see that these are those last cracks in this front that Syril has built up, and what he's been telling himself he's been involved with up to this point with Dedra, with the Empire. He knew that he was kind of becoming a little bit of a mole into this Ghorman underground front. He thought, it felt cool. It felt like, I'm a part of something. He's figuring out maybe I'm a part of the wrong thing.
Right.
And so we're about to see the rest of that facade, fall apart. But running into Caro in the street and having that moment of frustration, like, just to me puts a kind of an exclamation point on where this next little bit for Syril is headed.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series, perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hawk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
Cassian's leaving the hotel. He says to the bellhop desk guy, he says, I'm not sure I'll be back. And he says, hey, I hope things work out for you, to the front desk guy. And he responds, that classic line that we get in Rogue One, rebellions are built on hope. So he's bought in, even on some level, and having a history of family, with some of the previous resistance and protests and things like that. The plaza is flooded with, thousands of gore. They're there, they're chanting, very demonstrative. And Cassian can sense that something's off. He's looking for Will. He sees Dedra out over the plaza, takes a couple of different times, with that little scope to see, does he have a shot? And as usually happens in a dance like this, right when he gets her lined up, she turns around, walks back inside.
And by the way, does anybody in any movie you've ever seen, any show, do the unhappy frown look better than Denise
Guff, however we say that?
Who plays her? It's just like she has got that very angry British general look
that nails it every time. So meanwhile, Syril makes his way to the building and he's looking for Dedra. He's put into a holding room with some locals, and as we see, half a dozen of the KX droids. And they're trying to do like this holding. We want to make sure everybody's safe. They're placating. Just wait in here a minute. We're just making sure it's okay. And Kaido tells a commander to close all of the exits, and this is when it's about to go down. Close off the exits to the plaza. Stormtroopers pile in at the top of the stairs. So well done, stacked up, lined up, just ready to impose their will, to create that front that just adds to the experience. Kaido has the patrols. He says, keep a pathway to the memorial open. And he says, send a group of those troops that we've gotten, these inexperienced troops that we saw show up, send them down the middle. We've created this path, send them down it. Protesters break some rocks on the ground. Molotov cocktails are being quietly distributed. And Lazine chimes in, which is singing what's probably the Gore national anthem. And all the group starts singing. It's kind of that, the wave crests, starts with a slow clap and starts to build, creating this moment. We're reaching the fever pitch of this protest and what is going on right here. While the whole time, Dedra and that resting, displeased face is standing above, looking down on all of it.
Yeah, I think it was a really cool choice to get them to go from, we are the Gore, the galaxy is watching, to this theme song, because once the shit hits the fan, having them all singing is much more haunting. So I think it's really well done. So Syril has snuck out of this holding room and he's gone to find his way to Dedra. He gets in the room. There's a commander in there. She says, get out of the room. So it's just her and Syril in the room. And Syril says, what are we doing here? And Dedra replies with the classic, just following orders, right? And
who, me?
Yeah, I'm just following orders. Syril says, how long have you known about this? So it's all, Syril has figured it out now. They have set this whole thing up so that there will be protests. He was involved on both sides against his better, against him even knowing it. And she says she wants to discuss it later, but he says it's too late already. He grabs her and demands to know what they're doing there and why there are mining ships and why they're already unloading. And he says, you couldn't even wait like that. And that's like where Syril becomes human. He realizes, look, I know it's the Empire's going to do their thing, but they couldn't even wait to start destroying the planet until they finished this horrible act.
Right.
And he presses her and says, why do they need it? Grabs her literally by the throat. She says, there's a stone in the dirt here. They need it for the energy program. Again, not even mentioning the Death Star. Directly from the Emperor, they need the planet. And he asks how long she's known, and she tells him they're going home as heroes. It's been planned for years, and there's nothing that they can even do about it. And she angrily reminds him that he sure didn't mind getting those promotions along the way, which, again, sort of that reminder of, you've been human, but not really. And it all starts to come together, and he just says good luck to Dedra and leaves her alone and heads into the courtyard. He's out there with the Ghor at this point. Soldiers are pushing through the crowd and tensions begin. A random Ghor throws a rock at the Imperials in riot gear, and the fences begin to rock, and the riot sticks start to crackle, and you can tell it's about to go down.
Yeah, it's go time. Partagaz calls Dedra and says, proceed, you got to go. An Imperial sniper shoots one of the new recruit Imperials, which we saw this coming. We saw it, from the beginning. You're bringing in these green, inexperienced guys to make it appear that it's coming from the Ghor. And it's one of those things when the tensions are up, the heat's on. It doesn't matter who shot or where it came from. Somebody saw something shooting, and then everybody's shooting. Chaos erupts. A sergeant on the ground yells, open fire. A man waving a flag from the monument is shot, and the screaming continues. After several minutes of this part of the massacre, Kaido orders the KX droids to be released. And they are incredible. Overpowered monsters. Picks Enza up and throws her. She lands like a rag doll on the ground, seemingly dead, clearly dead. Dead bodies everywhere, mostly the Ghorman citizens. Blaster fire left and right. Cassian has an open shot at Dedra, but he is spotted by Syril, who's been searching for him since season 1, which is a great culmination on this whole thing. Tackles him with a dramatic hand-to-hand fight in the front lobby of what looks like a bar or the hotel or whatever that room is. And they're going at each other. They're fighting. And Syril gets the upper hand. And he's right there. He's got a blaster towards Cassian. Cassian says, who are you? And right in that moment, Syril takes a bolt to the head. And it's Cara Rylance. Popped in, showed up at just the right moment. Willman arrives at the same shop, picks Cassian up, drags him out of there. So we say goodbye to Syril. We say goodbye to, that dynamic, the kind of cat and mouse game that the two of them have had ever since season 1.
What I think is most interesting and what I love about it is the last words that Syril hears. He's been going after Cassian since season 1. Like that was what got him into this whole thing. Cassian just says, who are you? So he's nobody. He's absolutely nobody. And he has gone through all of this stuff. Syril has gone through all of this. And he's nobody. Not even
Ray
the guy
nobody?
No,
wait. Sorry, that's a different thing.
He's Syril Skywalker. No,
he's Ray's cousin.
But he just he pushed his way through all this and for nothing. And I think that's sad, but it's such a great way to tell the story. Dedra is watching the carnage. Will and Cassian are trying to escape when more KX droids run through the streets, closing in on them. And just as one KX droid is about to get them, this speeder comes through the streets and hits the robot at top speed, knocks him into the wall. Will goes back. They're all safe for a moment. Will goes back to the HQ because he needs to find Adrena. And Cassian takes the speeder back to the ship. But first, Cassian gets Will to help him pack up the KX droid, which they busted in half to take back to Yavin base. Will's girlfriend is heard broadcasting that the Imperial slaughter is on, begging for help. When Will arrives, she says, we need to let people know what happened. And Dedra, once again, is in the safe room. She's grabbing her collar in panic. Everybody thought maybe that was Vader choking her. Nope, it was just panic choking her. Her hand is shaking. You can see she's crying. She's attempting to straighten her uniform. She's really trying to pull herself together. We don't know what happens to her after this, but then the last scene of the episode is Syril's mother watching coverage of the Ghorman Massacre on the Imperial Holonet. The story is being told as an insurrection, and that the Imperial heroes that died trying to stop it are the focus of the story. It ends seeing Syril's mom weeping while watching the news and being comforted by her friends. I thought that was a great way to end it. She did all she could to get Syril up in the ranks, and he was never good enough. But in a weird way, he died a hero to her because she doesn't know what happened.
Right. She has no idea.
So in a way, she knows, she gets her wish. Her son died a hero, and but in a really sick, twisted way.
A very sick, twisted way. Well, and I want to come back to the KX droid for just a second, which this droid, of course, we know is going to. It's safe to assume that this droid is going to end up being K2SO. But this KX droid, as we see in this whole scene, I mean, like you said, overpowered, flinging bodies, throwing people left and right, taking multiple shots, shot after shot after shot, to the point where the only thing that stopped it was basically a front end loader, cut it in half and pinned it against a wall. I think that, and maybe we'll come to a nitpick in a few minutes, but my interesting thing about that is I hope we get, even if it's just one or two lines somewhere in the next little bit, about what was it about that Cassian went, you know what, throw that in the back of the truck. I'm taking it with me. Obviously it's easy to assume like, oh crap, that thing's really powerful. Maybe that would come in handy, but I don't know if that's it because we don't know that whole backstory. This is the first parts of that we're ever getting. So I'm very intrigued to see, like, does he already envision like, ooh, if I could have something like that with me, it would make me feel more safe. Like I'm curious about his motivation, I guess, which is.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's almost that sort of mindset of, sort of looting when you can, taking what you can, but man, to take a risk on the streets at that moment seemed a little bit.
There's a lot going on to be like, let's pack this up and take an extra minute and let's grab this.
Right. It's the closest thing to this is Han Solo's last name kind of situation. Well, and I'll tell you, while we're on the topic of those droids, if you have never seen if you know nothing about Star Wars and the story, and you watch this, and then you go into Rogue One when Jyn is picked up by a K2 droid, you're like, oh, she's dead. She's going to die. Yeah. And then he's got that witty little line.
Congratulations, you're being rescued. After she gets full body slammed onto the floor by one arm.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series perfect for fans of Agotar and Fourth Wing. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hawk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
So that does take us into episode 9, which is the last of this third arc of this amazing show we've been watching. It's a rainy evening on Coruscant, and we're at the halls of the Imperial Senate, some nighttime Senate action going on, and we see Senator Oren of Ghorman being arrested. And it's a big scene, and like it's kind of that, people are milling around in the lobby, he's being arrested, and as he says his quote was, "with no cause or warrant." What's going on? Obviously, they've decided to connect him to this massacre. Did he incite the rebels? Is he a part of it? We don't get the full justification for why they did that, but they arrested him because his planet is in rebellion to the Empire at this point. Mon Mothma wants to speak up. She is with Bail Organa again. And Bail encourages her and says, "You can, but I can't join you." And in the moment initially, we're kind of led to feel like, well, dude, what's the deal? Like, why aren't you doing this? And he wants her to be the voice, and he wants her to get to Yavin, but he's going to keep his head down, and he says to buy more time. And so he's going to kind of stay, if he can play a little bit more undercover. Obviously, we know the things that he's going to do and what's going to lead to Leia and some of that kind of stuff. But he is still a part of this, but he's saying, this is your moment. I need to stay here and see what I can do from this position. Luthen needs Cassian to go to Coruscant and bring Mon Mothma to Yavin. So he does the same thing. Send him undercover as a reporter. You're going to go cover the Senate. And right as he's getting ready to go, he's talking to Clea, and he says, "I'm done after this." And she presses him a little bit, and she's like, "What do you mean?" And he says, he'll know what it means, because Cassian and Luthen have had this back and forth for a while now. Yeah. How much is too much? What do you want from me? What am I supposed to give? And then Mon Mothma is also warned by Bail that there could be a listening device in her office, because another one was found. I think they said in, Oren's office. And so he's just saying, you're not safe right now. And then that is proven to be true because we see Samaj finds one while they're there talking. And I love she takes like that plate or whatever it is and kind of chops the device in half. And we see in the listening room, it goes dead. And it's just like, okay, picking up speed again, which is what we do. We get a little tiny crest and then we go right back into it.
Yep, and then Luthen and so actually before I continue, there's a weird sort of feeling I get about Bail, and I know that we know he's a good guy, and I know that we saw in Rogue One that he did what he could to make sure that Leia could deliver the plans and blah blah blah. But it just feels kind of weird, especially because it's his ship, and we'll get to that in a second because Luthen and Mon meet up and Luthen tells Mon that his team's been compromised. There's untrustworthy elements within it. I don't know.
I'm with you. Watching these moments, it felt a little bit like, not that I thought it was dirty or shady, but I almost thought like you should be standing up a little bit more. You should be a little more bold and, don't let her take all the heat, find a way to, you're right. It was played in a way that just made you go, is he a good guy? Like you just had that half moment where you're like, I mean, we know where it's going because we've seen parts of this story farther down the road, but in that moment, it felt a little bit like, could it have been done in a bolder way, I guess?
Well, yeah. And again, much like we were just saying about, you don't know about K2 droids when you start out with Rogue One. If you don't know the story of Star Wars, that it's kind of an interesting thing. Maybe you question this guy. Which, again, great writing. It's allowed to be looked at different ways by different people. So anyway, Mon speaks to Luthen and talks about Tay Kolma and asks Luthen if it's possible she will be as expendable as Tay was, which I guess kind of sort of backdoor answers for us what happened at the end of episode 3. Luthen says she's needed and tells her Cassian will be coming to get her with a passcode, which is I have friends everywhere. Mon Mothma also finds out that Samaj has been working for Luthen. I don't know why he told her that. And that her driver Chloris is also an Imperial spy, which I think she kind of knew. So Mon confronts Samaj about working for Luthen. She fires him. We see Luthen, Cassian, and Clea meeting, and there will be being uncertain about whether Mon Mothma will go through with this speech or not. Cassian finds out that Luthen isn't going to Yavin, and he's angry because he thinks Luthen should be leading from there, while clearly he has other plans, and we may or may not learn about them in the final arc. So the Senate begins to gather, and we see the Imperial security and the Empire have seemingly arranged things to suppress talk of Ghorman and only let certain approved speakers share the agenda. That sounds horribly familiar to today's times.
It does, and I hate to even laugh at it, but sometimes that's all you can do. Yeah, exactly. I loved this little segment because Mon Mothma is a smart woman. She hasn't made it this far to being this part of something as big as the rebellion and not be smart, but it also felt like this was done in just a certain way that like her vision became 2020 at this point. Like all the last little pieces fell into place. Honestly, love what they said where she talks about Tay because we had, speculated on that way back and that scene of him being driven away in the car and that whole deal. We're like, that's it. Like this is done. And I like that they can do something like that off screen and it comes back 5 episodes later and you're like, they did. They took him out and she's carried that because that was her childhood friend, possibly a lover. Like there's these other connected elements to it. But then everything else, the listening device, maybe Bail and Luthen, like all of these things are crystallizing the fact that she's like, oh, we're in it now. It's really here. It's really happening. And there's also that uncertain, is she going to speak? Like she watched Oren get arrested and she found out like, is finding the listening device and learning about Samaj going to be enough to warn her off, which is of course what the Empire wants. But we know that she's got the stones to do it, but it's set up in such a way that even then you're just like, are we going to get there? Are we going to make it? Before the big meeting where she's going to give the speech, Bail and Mon Mothma meet one more time. And, just kind of that going through, all right, you got this, it's going to be fine. And then we get, I think this is the 3rd time in this series. We get the use of the word shit. He tells her, quote, tear the shit out of this place. So for those of you keeping score at home, shit is canon in Star Wars. During the meeting, because like we said, this was a very prearranged meeting and we hear it said, it's a early meeting or whatever. It's not going to be well attended, kind of all arranged to not draw a lot of attention. And it was supposed to be a prearranged, rundown of who's going to speak and who's going to have the floor. But during the meeting, Bail chimes in, and I love that they even say he uses an old Imperial Senate rule that came from the Emperor himself that allows him, as a senior senator, to yield uninterrupted time to anyone he wants.
There's a strict agenda this morning, but as per the latest Imperial ruling on Senate protocols, I'd like to invoke Article 17252. A17252 was, as you may recall, proposed directly by the Emperor's Council. It specifically states that a senior senator, in the case of emergency,
may yield the floor freely, without interruption, to another senior senator.
I am invoking Article 17252 and yielding the floor to the senior senator from Chandrila.
Shut down the Senate feed. Imperial authority. Shut it down.
And immediately there's this panic in the, monitoring room, like cut the feed, something's coming. We get the scene where, the guy is trying to get into the room to cut the feed. Oh, the door's locked. We fixed it. You've been asking us for months to fix it. And these two little texts. I loved that little scene with those two little texts. And he's literally like, this door's been, basically it was, this door's been broken for months. Why is it fixed now when I need to get in there? Like, oh, sorry, the key's back in the other room. So he runs away. And the one person with like little eye, droid add-ons or whatever, just kind of look at each other like, we did it. Bought a little bit more time. I thought that was a fun little, moment.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about it before, just that sort of little bit of comedy in the middle of a Star Wars,
in the middle of something heavy,
moment.
And very tense. So she gives the speech and she's working her way through it, and she gets right up that point. She mentions the Emperor by name, and the Emperor or the Imperials finally can cut the feed. Goes dark right after that. Of course, an uproar starts. She exits the center chamber. She begins to make her way out. As she's making her way out, she runs into Cassian, getting on the elevator. He gives her that passcode, and she's like, again, that light bulb goes off. It's time to go. They run into Bail's crew in the lobby, and we see the scene at one point when they're in the little stock room. Where are the guns? They're back here. I'll go get them. And the one Bail, bad guy takes out one of the other guys. So they encountered the insider in the lobby of the building. After a very, very short standoff, Cassian shoots her in the head. Samaj picks up her blaster, kind of holds off the others and says, y'all need to go. Get out of here. Yeah. Sends them on their way. On their way to the car, of course, they encounter the last holdout, Cloris, standing there. And, what's your driver's name? What's your just that, again, building the tension. Hey. And then he's just like, boom, gone. Got to go. Because they knew that wasn't happening.
What I took out of those two little things you just were mentioning is Mon Mothma has never seen the killing up front. She's never seen what's involved. And Cassian is just callous, and we see that, and we'll see it in Rogue One. You got to do what you got to do. Hey, Cloris might be a good guy, but he's also working for the Empire, and he's there to cause trouble, so he's got to die.
That's
right.
And
she's just like her response is perfect. It's the and it kind of reminds me and the audience that she knows what's like the idealism behind it, but people will die, and they're not just on television or whatever. They're not just on the HoloNet. And it's not just numbers. People will die in front of her.
It's real life. They get in her car. They get away, which I haven't said it, I don't think, in any of these episodes so far. I love her car. Her speeder. I keep calling it a car. Her speeder is such a great, and at some point I'm going to go on a big tangent about just the Art Deco, nature of this show and so much of the set design. So they escape. They end up in the safe house, the Coruscant safe house, where we saw Bix and Cassian before. And while they're there, we see Wilmon and Drina are there. He's injured, been shot, I think, in the leg. Drina's taking care of him. Clea's there, and they learn that Luthen is alive, but he's not there. And this is again kind of feeding into this narrative. What's Luthen's deal? Where is he? He's still a wild card to most of them. And so then in the middle of this, Cassian is told, "You're not taking her to Yavin. You got her out of there, but we're in a different mode now. We're in a different level. They need her to give another speech, kind of the official hey, I've left. It's a rebellion speech. And they said they want her to have a Yavin escort into the planet. Like, you have to put a face on this. It has to be very presentational. So they're standing there in that kitchen. He goes to the cabinet and gets a glass and takes a drink. And that's when it kind of clicks for her. She's like, you've been here before. And I love this little, it was a very small little exchange, but also, again, she's realizing there's a lot of people who have a lot of stake in this, more than just what she's been doing. And that's not to minimize what she's been doing. But like you said, she's getting to have the more personal connections to the actual things that are going on, not, orchestrating from above. So she's running into this guy who's been boots on the ground. And she's like, oh, you've been here before. And he's like, yeah, I've lived here, at times or whatever. So then when it kind of dawns her, she says, I'm not sure how to thank you. And I love his response. He said, make it worth it. And, that kind of feels like the end of, or the part in Saving Private Ryan. I think that's what, he says to him, something along those lines. But that's a great, kind of cap on all the high energy of the escape, getting away from the Senate, ending up in this safe house. And now all of her world is coming the rest of the way into focus.
Yeah. Now she realized she has to get her hands dirty, and that and not that she didn't want to. She just didn't know what was involved. She just, it never was real. I mean, and if we look at her Chandrilla life versus what she's about to go into, it doesn't get much different. Yeah. So as we come to the end of the episode, Cassian, Wilman, and Drina arrive on Yavin, and they take him out to tend his wounds. Cassian speaks with Draven and tells him that Will is young and that he'll be just fine, and then heads back home to Bix, who makes him a tea and tells him he needs to sleep. Cassian says he's done and he's not doing this anymore. He wants to leave. He wants to have a life with her. Interestingly, he just came from the safe house where she wanted that, and he said we couldn't do it. And now he's kind of come around to, you know what, we've done enough. We can't do anymore. And unfortunately, the next morning he wakes up and Bix is gone, and she has left him a video message telling him that the rebellion needs him and he won't do it if she's there. So when it's all over, they'll be able to do the things they talked about. I think it goes back to that Force healer who said that, maybe you're what he needs to come home to. And she doesn't feel like she doesn't feel right about being the reason that maybe he screws up, or maybe he doesn't give the commitment that he needs to. He's done this much. To give up at this point wouldn't be fair to everything that's been done so far. I don't know that I love it. I don't know that it feels completely Bix to me, although I think you can kind of make an argument that she has kind of softened in a way. Maybe not softened, but become more of a realist over
I'm
these
gonna
first 9 episodes.
I'm gonna take another side of that. I'm gonna say she's as bought into the rebellion as anybody is, and I think her buy-in to this rebellion is the realization, because we kind of get it with Vel and Cinta, and we kind of get it with a couple different times throughout this, like, it's not about our lives. It's not about what we want. It's about the bigger thing. And I've took this for Bix going, would it be great to live in this, Ewok hut on Yavin and just, hang out with Force healers and get, acupuncture or whatever else is we're going to do. But in order to get there, I took it as a noble thing. I took it as her being so bought into the rebellion that she knew Cassian's needed, and she had to sacrifice her happiness and her wants because he wasn't going to do it in order for him to get to what he's needed. And so for me, so for me, it was very much like this was her, she so bought into the rebellion that she put her own happiness behind that, is how I took this. Yeah.
And maybe it gives him a little bit of extra drive, right, to kind of get there. So he runs to the platform, and it's too late to catch the shuttle. She's already left. I guess maybe we'll see her running other missions for Luthen or something. Then the soldier calls him and tells him that the droid that he brought back is ready, and he joins a couple techs and some others who are very tentative about awakening this KX droid. And then we get a classic K2SO awakening, very Frankenstein, very sort of Darth Vader. And he says,
"Hello. If I've offended you, I apologize. If not, I'd appreciate you pointing that elsewhere.
It was very K2, and it was a great way to introduce him, and I can't wait to see what they have lined up for him in the next 3 episodes. So.
That's 100% it. It was very K2. It falls into, it will end poorly, or, just all those little bits like, hey,
you know that wasn't me.
If I bothered you, I'm sorry, but get that gun out of my face. Like, the personality's there right from the beginning, which we love.
And I do love that, they even said, like, just these little sort of quote unquote fixes. And I did not read the comic book one-off where K2 and Cassian get together, but obviously they've thrown that out the window. Although I do want to do some research on that before next week, because I want to see if they make any reference to it.
100%.
Much like where Cassian was originally from, according to one of the books. But they made it so that that was a ruse and whatever. But so I'm very excited to see that.
Captivating and action-packed, the Blood and Ash series by #1 New York Times bestselling author Jennifer L. Armentrout is a sexy, addictive series perfect for fans of Agotar and Fourth Wing. Chosen at birth to usher in a new era, Poppy's life is not hers. A maiden in solitary, waiting for the day of her ascension, Poppy would rather be with the guards fighting the evil that took her family. The entire kingdom rests on her shoulders when Hulk, a guard bound to protect, enters her life. He tempts her with the forbidden, a kingdom. Blood and Ash, a thrilling, steamy escape, available in print, ebook, and audiobook.
Well, Nick, we're at the point of our show where we take a little bit of time to deep dive into some of the themes and the storytelling. I have a thought on the theme. I don't know if you have the same or similar thought, but to me, the theme of this week was fascism's tools to shut down opposition. I think you saw the Ghorman Massacre was always going to happen. The Empire knew it. Krennic knew it. The Emperor knew it. It was really just a matter of playing the appropriate long game to set it up so the way that it appeared to the galaxy. So it wasn't so violent and vicious, but or appeared to be that. And the other tool of fascism is shutting down dissenting voices. The Ghorman senator being arrested, Mon Mothma being shut down, and then the attempt to kidnap her to keep her silent. So to me, that was sort of the theme of this episode, is sort of illustrating this is what the Empire does. This is what fascist governments do. Here it is with some of your favorite characters and how it impacts people on a personal level.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I love that while this was not the excoriation of, the American press and what's going on with the current presidential, administration and some of those kinds of themes, we do see the use of the press. We see the use of these reporters, whether it's on Ghorman, whether it's, Cassian as a vehicle to, get into the Senate, cutting off the feeds and things.
Yep.
But what we also get is misdirection, propaganda. They talked about propaganda in that meeting with Krennic, way back when they're kind of planning this whole thing out, because there are multiple different levels of what's an insurrection, but it's an insurrection we started. What does it appear like? Tell me what it looks like, not what it is. It becomes that kind of thing. And so we see that, and we see things now. The most easily accessible example is something popped up on Twitter. Every now and then the president will drop a thing about, I might run for a third term. Right. Well, generally speaking, that's not possible, and that's not a real thing. But if everybody spends all of their time, energy, and attention focusing on the fact that he said he might run a third time, that's taking your attention away from what are we really doing? What funding are we cutting? What department are we like? The Empire is doing that. And I do believe, because this is Tony Gilroy, because this is Dan Gilroy, because this is the people that are putting this show together and who have a background in political shows and a lot of these other things. This is very George Lucas-y in that it is reflecting on the world we're in right now. And it has direct one-to-one comparisons to what does rebellion look like? What does fascism look like? So you hit the nail on the head with the themes of these, and right on the edge of like, I feel uncomfortable enjoying this as a show, because I also feel like I saw this on CNN last night.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no. And I think it's, and it's interesting too, that this show was shot a couple years ago, right? Because it was put off by the writer's strike and the Actors Guild strike. So the sad thing is, this is kind of all an ever-present theme. So, is what it is, I guess. Well, every week Nick and I pick an MVP, and it's not always the primary character of the episodes, but so this week for me, my MVP is a little bit different. I'm picking Cara Rylands for a couple reasons. Number one is I just loved his presence and almost seeing, like, obviously he sort of started this Ghorman front. He's been around. He went through the Tarkin massacre. He tries to talk sense into people, but it's too late for that. His interaction with Syril, and then of course he's MVP because he gets the final shot at Syril Karn, takes him out, and then just sits there like he's we're not going to get it, and that's okay. But I would love to kind of see what happens to the survivors on Ghorman. Maybe we'll hear about it because Caro is not going to do well. He will be taken in by the Empire. They will make an example of him as leading the Ghorman front. But he did it. He did it for all the right reasons, sort of like Mon Mothma in a way. So that's my MVP. Nick, do you have an MVP?
I do have an MVP, and I had struggled with picking this person as my MVP simply because they're kind of the central focus of the show, given that their name is the title of the show. But I feel like my MVP for this arc is actually Cassian Andor. And I think that a lot of that I draw from, this is the point where we see him most conflicted. This is the point where he's ready to be done. He says it to Clea. He's on, he's with Bix. He's like, let's go, let's get away. Let's, go run away. Let's go do something. Because when we meet Cassian for the first time ever in Rogue One, he is battle hardened, mission focused, shooting his own guys, doing the things for the rebellion, no empathy, no anything. And we're learning how he got there. And Diego Luna does such a good job of conveying someone who can flip the switch and be in business mode and get Mon Mothma out and can go to, Ghorman and do this and that. But then when he gets into, like the healer said, the place he's supposed to be when he's with Bix, that switch comes off, his humanity comes through, and he's a person asking the questions. Why am I doing this? What's going on? What is this worth? So I really loved how well Diego Luna as Cassian, portrayed all of that in these 3 episodes. It really gave it a lot of weight to, again, what we see in Rogue One, because the first thing we see him do is shoot one of his own guys because he can't climb out.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you said there, because I didn't really think of it that way either until you just said it. But if the healer who Bix believes in, right? She believes all that stuff. If she's where he's supposed to be, now it makes a little more sense as to why she needs to leave, because she may be where he's supposed to be, but not yet. If she stays there, he's where he needs to be, and he's not focused. He's not fighting. He's not still going. I like that. I think it's certainly fair to give Cassian the MVP for this particular arc for sure.
Awesome.
But I'm calling it already next week, K2SO. I'm just putting it out there.
It's got to be. I mean, I think we'll just go ahead and seal that one in concrete.
Yeah, we'll just put that. We'll just reopen it next week. But so in this part of the show, we talk about lore connections. We talk about places where it's where other Star Wars stories have made direct connection here. And the first place is, again, going back to that secret cargo episode of Rebels. It's definitely worth watching, especially now that you've watched these episodes. I think we expected the speech to be sort of lined up directly with what she said, but it wasn't exactly the same. But again, it's a little bit of creative freedom. But she does have to give another speech, and they do set that up by saying, we need to get her. She needs to get a speech out to everybody. And what's really cool is it turns out she gives that speech from the Bridge of the Ghost, which is really cool. And again, there was that connection where Draven says, do you want to come watch Mon Mothma speak? And Cassian says, no, I've already seen her speak. But we do see in Rebels, we see various people around the galaxy watching her give that speech. which really is sort of the declaration of the rebellion, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
They also mentioned Gold Squadron escorting Mon Mothma off Coruscant, and we met them in that same Rebels episode. She was being escorted by them, and I think it was Bail Organa's ship.
Yes.
So really cool kind of connection there. A couple other really kind of small-ish things. The first Force Healer actually appeared in West End Games, which was the old RPG game from the late 90s. And it was a Miralon woman named Belandi Fear. And you've seen Miralon people before. Jedi Master Luminara was a Miralon as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I looked, there's really no other Force Healers in anything canon, which...
Rey is the Force Healer. She healed that snake. She brought Kylo back. You know,
so is Grogu.
That's right. Grogu's got it.
Yeah.
You know, we've got some Force Healers going on there. A couple other things that you had on our list, Pete, that are important.
Yeah.
Davitz Draven. I think Draven is a general. I hope I don't get his rank wrong.
I think he's general.
Makes his appearance. Of course, we see him in Rogue One. He's the one kind of giving out the orders, handing some things out. And we see this earlier version of his relationship with Cassian, as we said before. Hey, you can't do that. And Cassian's like, I don't report to you. But also connected to that, and we see, you know, Cassian is referred to as Captain Andor, which is the rank that he holds in Rogue One. You know, Claire or Vel or whoever it is says, you know, when she's talking to Bix, you know, he's right on the edge of being promoted, and then he goes and pulls a stunt like this. You know, so was that promotion going to be to captain, or was that promotion going to be the next one? I don't know, but it brings a little more into focus, kind of like, you know, holding the blaster up. Whose blaster is this? And it's, you know, Melshi. We're getting those faces that are going to show up that we're going to see in Rogue One here after 3 more short episodes that remain for this show. So all the things for us are coming into focus, much like they have for Mon Mothma over these 3 episodes.
Yeah. And, you know, we do only have 3 episodes left. I can't believe it. You know, again, I think we were all kind of expecting this to be a 3-month sort of opportunity to watch Star Wars. But, you know, I've really kind of enjoyed watching these as movies. And as I said before, I really think that after we watch the next 3 episodes, we're going to watch Rogue One as sort of no longer Rogue One, but, you know, a final season, a final arc.
Episodes 12, 13, and 14 of Andor.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm very curious to do that, and I can't wait to do that. But Nick, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Road to Rebellion, the official Around the Galaxy Andor after show. Thank you so much for joining us as we break down more and more of this fantastic season of Andor.
Absolutely. I echo those thanks. And if you have been with us all along the way, we thank you as well. We will be back next week. We're going to cover these final 3 episodes. I'm dying to see them. Numbers 10, 11, and 12. And we're going to see, and they told us they're going to walk us right up to Rogue One. So I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Absolutely. And if you're enjoying the show, make sure that you're subscribed to the Around the Galaxy podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, this is just one of the shows on the SSW Network.
That is correct. Every Thursday night, you can join us live on YouTube. We usually stream to some other social media platforms, but YouTube's the best place to be because you can interact, be in the live chat. You can go to youtube.com/@the SSW Network. And every week we're bringing you Star Wars news, celebrity interviews, your interactions in the live chat. And sometimes we throw the link in there so you can call in and join us on screen and talk to us about whatever is feeding your Star Wars love that week.
And if you want to support what we do, we'll head on over to patreon.com, patreon.com/the SSW Network, and you'll get early access, you'll get some exclusive content, and you get a chance to be part of the best Star Wars community that there is.
That's right. And if you like today's show, you could do us a huge favor. Leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Share it with your Star Wars friends. Tell us what you think of Andor this week. You can find us on all social media outlets at the SSW Network, or even better, call and leave us a voicemail, 504-321-1501. Leave us a message. We can play it on the show. We can answer it. We can get back to you in some way because we are always up for talking Star Wars.
Yes, we are. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks again for hanging out with us. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
And this has been The Road to Rebellion, and we will see you next week.
Road to Rebellion is copyright 2025 Pete in the Seat Studios. For more information on this show and other shows of the SSW Network, please head over to the SSWNetwork.com. Audio clips are copyright 2025 Lucasfilm.